background in solid waste and getting involved in innovative technologies and moving away from landfills from my past. And our first presenter is going to be Michael Hart, and talking about FastOx gasification. Michael.
All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. Looking forward to talking to you. As he said, my name is Mike Hart. I'm the CEO of Davis, California-based Sierra Energy. And picture here is of our first facility, which is up in Monterey County. Not the pretty part, the other part. But it's, so don't think downtown by the water or anything. This is on a military base out in the middle of nowhere. But anyways, I'm going to be talking a little bit about our FastOx gasification technology. And so what we do is our gasification technology can take any form of waste and break it down into its constituent elements, and does it without burning and without any waste product. I'm preaching to the choir here. As you know, the world creates a whole bunch of waste, 3.4 billion tons at this point, right by 2050. And that creates an enormous amount of methane, which is 86 times more impactful than carbon dioxide. The good news, we can turn it into all kinds of good things like clean energy. Bad news is there are all kinds of caveats to that. In fact, if I had to say there was one technology other than perpetual motion machines that need a working model to prove it, it's going to be gasification. The field is littered with dead bodies as far as gasification technologies that didn't work out. And so there are lots of caveats, and there's a lot of limitations to what technologies historically can do in gasification. Usually a very highly desiccated, segregated, homogeneous waste stream with a certain BTU value that's been pulverized, dried, beaten, separated, God knows what else. The problem is that's really expensive and really hard to do, and it leaves a lot left over. So you were probably getting to this part ahead of me that we're the solution. But these are the different feedstocks that we have demonstrated on with our technology, with our partner, the U.S. Army, over the last 20 years of building progressively larger systems. Tires, municipal solid waste, pretty much any kind of biomass. Batteries, electronic waste, what do we got in there? Construction, medical demolition debris, construction and demolition debris, medical waste, and pretty much any kind of hazardous waste. We operate at 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, it forgives a lot of sins in your waste. And so how our technology works is we introduce the waste into the system. It descends by gravity, and what happens is it reacts. The carbon in the waste itself reacts with oxygen and steam that are injected into the vessel. And so there is no other energy form that's being put into it. It's just a reaction of the carbon in the waste with the oxygen. At 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit, it rips things apart. And so what you end up with is molten metal, liquid slag, which is a saleable product, and the balance is a synthesis gas, in our case, carbon monoxide and hydrogen. One of the things that a lot of people that are in the renewable fuel space talk about is endlessly talk about, oh, sustainable aviation fuel. Typically, they're focused around fats, oils, grease, seeds. I mean, there's this very narrow segment of feedstocks that are available when you want to make renewable fuels. Gasification, in general, opens the door to other feedstocks, such as municipal solid waste, agricultural waste, all of these other sorts of things, agricultural waste, that simply wouldn't be available otherwise. So gasification is an enabling technology. There are other technologies that are talked about at these conferences, such as plasma, fluidized bed, indirect, and pyrolysis. Now, these are generally true. There may be exceptions to each one of these categories, but in general, what we found is that there are limitations. In some cases, it's not a flaw, it's a feature that, for example, like pyrolysis focuses on a narrow segment of the waste stream. But they make a pie crude that can do all kinds of great things. But what I'm just saying here is that where the real benefit is with FastOx gasification over other sorts of gasification historically is a much higher yield, and that is the amount of synthesis gas you generate net after you've taken that waste and converted it using our process. Again, preaching to the choir. In fact, I see a really good slide I'm going to steal later, earlier today. But as far as different things that you can do with synthesis gas, from the 10,000 plus inquiries we've received as a company, things that people want to do it, or where there are processes that already exist to take waste to turn into something of higher value through syngas, fertilizer, renewable natural gas, methanol, and all the things that unlocks, various chemicals, useful heat, protein, I didn't see that on the slide earlier, fuels and electricity. But the most common request we have been receiving is hydrogen. People are bananas about hydrogen right now because the incentives are lined up in the right direction. So these are all different things that you can make from synthesis gas. This gives you an idea of yield. And so in this case, we're looking at a 200 metric ton per day system, 200 metric tons per day of different kinds of feedstock, and what it would yield generally in different things. So if you were to make hydrogen, for example, this gives you the number of tons per year of hydrogen that you would create from 200 tons of waste per day coming in. Electricity, methanol, renewable natural gas, and ammonia are all shown. They're just giving you some examples based on different kinds of feedstocks. This shows the calorific value of those feedstocks converted to those end products. By the way, we don't do that. We just make a gasifier, and we just make it available to other people to integrate into their very clever processes. We don't do the clever stuff. So this is our demonstration facility at Fort Hunter Liggett in Monterey, California. We've demonstrated this system here since 2019. These are some of our investors, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, Cox, BNP Paribas, et cetera. I'm here because I am also the CEO of Sierra Railroad Company, which is the largest investor in the company, and I got into this to make fuel for my own fleet of locomotives, which are all over California. These are the folks that have invested in our company to bring it this far. Some of our partners, mostly governmental entities, that have helped develop and demonstrate the technology, as well as a number of awards we've won. So some of the benefits to folks that actually can use this technology is that you've got a modular design that's at 100 tons per day per module. And the idea is that we set that size arbitrarily. I was mentioning to some of the guys that are here that are doing a 50 ton per day gasifier. I'm saying, actually that's what we started with, but we had so many people saying that they really wanted to see something larger, and they had money, so we did what they said. So we went with larger systems. And so right now, most of the customers we're working with are in the 200 to 500 metric tons per day range, so 2 to 5 modules put together. Then one of the things that we found is that we are building a system that is a scaled down version of this 100 ton per day system is what we're going to be demonstrating there. Customers basically want to see it at a higher TRL level before they're going to write gigantic checks before they'll get there. And for those of you that have been following the saga of some of our other companies in our industry that haven't done so well, watching hundreds of millions of dollars disappear on great big projects, it makes a lot of sense to demonstrate it really thoroughly before you start spending the big bucks. This is a busy little slide, and hopefully you guys can read all the words on here. But basically what this just shows is the progression of our technology through time. And that is that when we first started out 20 years ago, as we moved up the technological readiness level, as we've gone through each scale, demonstrating each aspect of the technology, the amounts of runtime in each category, new patents and such that have been filed, and then the actual investment. I think at this point we're $74 million of our own money going into this thing at this point, and this year completed to get to TRL 7, and that's actually just running at this new version, which has been built. We've done various engineering studies for different customers that have come to us. Some of them we can't give their names and such, but as they've come in, we do studies for them how our technology will integrate into their system. We are not a project developer, and I won't have any of my own projects to talk about up here. These are helping other people with their big projects. where a gasifier would enhance what they're doing. An example of a project that we just are talking to another company right now about, they're doing 1,500 acres of solar, where their objective is to make hydrogen. They're going to make about 40 tons of hydrogen a day net through their electrolyzers. We showed them with $200 million additional, so just an extra $200 million with gasification, we can take their waste product, which is oxygen. That's our feedstock for our system. Taking that oxygen into our system, we could double their output for an extra $200 million. So a 4-to-1 advantage as far as doubling their output by just simply adding something they're already planning on building. So we see ourselves as a technology that's additive to things that other people are doing, whether it's pyrolysis, anaerobic digestion, or some sort of electrolyzer project. We focus on licensing and just making it available to people that have something they're trying to accomplish. As far as CI scores, this is something that should be evident to folks here that are in this space, but when you take waste and actually use it to make hydrogen, you actually have a negative CI score. And more importantly, if it includes carbon sequestration as part of the solution, you can have a deeply negative CI score. I mentioned that I'm also the CEO of Sierra Railroad Company. I've been the CEO there for 30 years. We were voted the nation's most environmental railroad, and we currently operate the lowest emission fleet in America. One of the things that we're working on doing right now is how to move hydrogen by rail, and our plan is to move it effectively as a solid, and there is a very long description of how we're going to do that, but it's basically using ferrous oxide and flooding it with hydrogen to turn into virgin Fe, then flood it with steam when we're ready to recover the hydrogen again. But it makes it so you can move it as an inert object. Each one of those blocks is 1 metric ton that contains about 100 kilograms of net hydrogen potential, but it makes it incredibly safe to move over the road. And for our fleet of locomotives, you can simply fuel by sliding one of these blocks under the locomotive. So it makes the handling and transfer incredibly safe, very easy, and that's our focus. This talks about our roadmap. We've funded about $100 million collectively between the railroad and the energy company at this point, developing both the hydrogen locomotives. The first one is built. 3 more are funded and should be completed probably over the next year. The gasifier, I just mentioned, we put about $74 million into that. We need to put another $12 million into testing at this point. We've purchased the 116-acre site for the manufacturing facility for the hydrogen locomotives, as well as we actually do final assembly for the gasifiers for customers. The hydrogen brick study, as well as demonstrating a much larger facility for people that are going to need it for hydrogen. And finally, for expansion, California needs sites for their hydrogen fueling stations. We've identified that as a railroad, we can put these down in about 2 to 4 weeks per location by rail. So that's it. Would it be easier if people did questions one at a time? Or? So if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I intended to keep this thing. Hold questions to the end. Thank you all very much.
Can't change the agenda. So our next speaker is, since I'm not going to destroy his last name, we're going to refer to him as Dr. Todd, as I cannot pronounce that name, even though we practiced a little bit there. But he is from the Zero Waste Group, and he's going to talk a little bit about the technology that they have.
Thank you. Okay, I feel, I've got to even bend that down a little bit. So I feel a little bit almost like I'm underdressed for a conference like this because I'm underdressed in brain power. I sat back and I listened to the presentations and I thought, wow, these people are really, really smart, you know. And I'm more of a simple person. You know, I recognize that, you know, the gentleman up here from Argentina was talking about his difficulty and how he learned English in Australia. Well, I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and we learned English from the hills. And so if you happen to hear an accent, that it isn't an accent in Kentucky, it's just an accent here. And so we try to keep things simple. And frankly, you know, all this conversation about just a mere 200 million, and I mean, I heard somebody back there talking about $1 billion, and I'm thinking to myself, we're small. We're really small in a lot of ways. I mean, and so, you know, our goal is simple. Our founder started the company and named it Zero Waste because he wanted to find a way to, you know, eliminate landfills. I mean, overly simplistic kind of concept, but he has spent the last 20 years working on technology that has tried to put that at the place where waste is made. So our goal is pretty simple. We're a patented combined, you know, heat and power technology that converts waste at the site. We are small scale and modular. We sit in a Connex box. So if you know a Connex box, it's 20 foot by 8 foot by basically 8 foot. And our goal is to be where waste is happening as much as possible so that we can take care of that waste and eliminate it at the site, at the same time providing heating and power to that site. So turning that waste into something that's usable. Again, I could come up here, and I'm not an engineer. My doctorate's in leadership. And that's not a joke, you know. So all we're trying to do is lead a project to where we can help people. Overly simplistic concept. We have very smart engineers, and I actually called him because we were talking about PFAS back a second ago, the young lady back there, and I said, I don't know the answer to this. Can you help me? He should have been the one up here with the type of brains that are sitting in this crowd. But I'm up here, so I apologize, and I'm going to hold you, you know, as little as possible because he's right. Drinks are after me. And so let me get into it. So our unit is very small scale. We call this the Hart. So there's 3 sections to Watogy. The first section is a pre-processing, so depending on your waste stream. We typically right now are using primarily homogenized waste, but we have the ability to use mixed waste. But most of our early adopters have a homogenized waste system. So as we process that, we do an elemental analysis, a BTU analysis, a PFAS analysis. And what we do is we actually use that waste and we optimize the size and moisture of that waste to be processed through. We are not developing the pre-processing part. So I heard somebody in here say that they were with a grinder company. I'd love to see you after this because we're looking for a lot of grinders and a variety of types of grinders. We don't want to invent things that are already out there. We want to take the things that are out there, connect them to our technology, and utilize it in a different way. So it feeds into the unit. Where we have patents is in our combustion chamber. So basically, the lead patent that makes the biggest difference is as the waste drops into our combustion chamber 1, it literally has a tornado-like effect. And so the waste gets put in that tornado-like effect, and we get 100% surface combustion for that waste. What that allows us to do is maximize and optimize the resource recovery of that waste in heat, and it also allows us to be able to make sure that the emissions are low related to that. So as it moves from one chamber to the next chamber, it actually goes through a second process of combustion, and what is left is that inert material that cannot be combusted. Again, I'm from Kentucky, and I try to keep analogies very simple. I grill in my backyard for my kids, and if you ever grill, you know that some pieces of that food is going to go down and not be able to be it'll fall down into that tray. We have a particle precipitator, and that's basically a tray that catches all the inert material. It's a very fine ash. Our goal is to partner with primarily paint companies and use that ash to help with those paint companies. They are interested in purchasing the ash that's left over. So we produce 3 outputs That's the third part of the unit. You know, there's the pre-processing, the heart of Watogy, which I just showed you, and then the last part is what is the outputs. So we have three proprietary heat exchangers on the unit. The unit runs at somewhere between 2,000 and 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit, so not near his 4,000 degrees, but high enough to where we do destroy PFAS as a byproduct of what we do with the solids. And we run those through our heat exchangers, and it allows us to be able to push out a customized either heating, cooling, or electricity for the client, depending on their use case. A lot of our industrial clients or wastewater treatment plants, they need a lot of heat for their processes. So we actually have a wastewater treatment plant that we're getting ready to install a demo unit, a pilot unit in, and they are actually using the heat that we're doing to replace the heat that they were using because they were producing methane, and they can actually sell the methane for more money than our unit cost. By the way, I didn't mention this before, but we're no CapEx. We're a leasing model. You know, the model for a unit, it's small scale. It's priced so that we can actually use the cost that we're replacing on waste management and energy production. So it's an operations expense that is actually a wash, or some of our clients actually come out ahead with the unit. We process a lot of different wastes. We've talked about most of these. I will tell you that our early adopters have been focused on wastewater treatment plant sludge, industrial sludge, some construction waste, and a little bit of agriculture have been our primary places where we've seen early adoption. So again, we're not 200, I think you said 200 tons a day. Most of our, we do about a ton a day. Our unit is positioned so that it does about 500,000 BTUs an hour. So this isn't rocket science. Even I can do the math. We get a BTU analysis of the waste. And once we do, you divide that 500,000 by that BTU content. And what happens is that gives us the amount of pounds per hour that we can process. Our unit is built to run continuously, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It does have the ability to hold temperature in the combustion chambers for up to 7 days to self-ignite. We start the unit to get the unit up to speed through a simple propane tank. It takes about 15 minutes to heat up the internal core enough to where it's self-ignition. We use, regulations that we've checked, federal regulations, but in particular, we actually have to work with the partner on any state regulations that they might have. To this point, we've not needed a catalytic converter because we've not dealt with any of the waste that we've done have not produced the NOx, that we need the catalytic converter. We know from simulations that we can adjust our flow rate and the temperature from that flow rate to be able to minimize that for certain clients that might have that, or we could just add a catalytic converter into the unit. So from an output standpoint, generally speaking, I mentioned that we have three heat exchangers. We typically focus our unit on producing this element. So we can produce 10 tons of HVAC and 35 kilowatts of power from our unit. We have a micro turbine that goes in to be able to produce the electricity from the heat. And we have a partner out of Italy they have their U.S. headquarters in Evansville called Rober, and they are heat absorption chillers. And so we can put 2 or 3, depending on what the client would like from a standpoint of outputs. We use approximately 6 kilowatts of the power for our own unit, and it does all of the control panels and all the sensors and stuff. I think I mentioned this earlier, but our unit's in a Connex box. It's done for safety reasons, but also because it makes it very convenient to move. And so we literally can pick up the Connex box and move it to another place. What we found, especially in commercial and wastewater treatment plants, is they might have multiple places where they have waste being produced. We can put our unit or units, because we are modular and scalable, we can put them at the place where that waste is happening for that customer, and then connect them into connect our unit into their mechanicals based off of their use case and best optimization of that power that we're generating for them. Mentioned a couple of our partners. The University of Louisville Conn Center has been the strategic partner to provide a lot of the additional support that we need, especially on simulations. It's good to have a strong university that can do that for you, where you don't have to do it yourself a lot of times. Hopefully this will play. I wanted to show kind of the effect of an actual waste being into our unit. Let me see if this is going to work with this button. Okay, and so you can kind of see how the feed is going in. It's an autonomous, automatic, feeding system, and you can kind of see the whirl, the whipping around the flames as it goes through. And that's the key to our maximization of those BTU content and keeping our emissions low is the fact that we're getting 100% surface combustion on the unit. I've got a simulation of what a unit looks like inside just to provide some context. So you'll see it's a Connex box. I mean, most of you are probably very familiar with the Connex box. This is not scaling very well, but that's okay. What you'll see in here is our, oops, sorry. I was trying to pause it. Can you see if you can do that for me? Sorry, I won't try and pause it this time. What you'll see is we are modular in nature, and so everything is sitting on a steel platform with wheels. We literally, when we have any issues, we can pull the unit out and take each piece out. That's the heart of the Watogy, that's the pre-processing unit, that's the microturbine, those were the two Rober units. Each of these pieces we could take out because our model is a lease model. We own the unit, we own the responsibility for any downtime. We don't want any downtime. So we built the unit so that we can actually minimize the downtime by literally coming with a specific area. We can replace any of those parts on site within an hour. And so we don't have to repair on site, we can literally replace. The simplicity of this is part of our strategy for implementation and expansion is to make sure that we are successful in the early adopters, because most of our early adopters need tens to hundreds of units. And so our goal is to find the right early adopters, which we have 10 right now, and be able for the next 3 to 6 months, place those units on those places at those partners and be able to demonstrate the use case scenario for each of those different partners in different sectors that we partnered with. I guess I'm up for questions now. Thanks.
Well, thank you for those presentations. Very, very interesting. Modular operations are always, I think, intriguing to put them at the generation of the feedstock that you have out there. So what questions do we have from the audience standpoint? Yes, ma'am. We'll get the microphone to you.
This is a question for Mike. Could you tell us if Sierra has any plans for commercial scale facilities? I'm sorry if you already covered this during your presentation, but Yeah, it would just be really interesting to know if a commercial scale facility like yours could be viable in California.
You threw in a curveball at the very last sentence there. The first, for starters, I mentioned we've had 10,000 inquiries. Of those, there's probably 12 that are willing to buy a serial number one, and of those, 8 are engaged in active siting plans and things like that. Only one of them is in the United States. The incentives are extraordinarily good. I've switched microphones if you don't mind, but only one is in the United States. Most around uncertainty around the IRA and such for a lot of people's large projects. Most of the projects we're getting tucked into $400 million to $2 billion projects, of which we're a little piece. And so we're selling the system number one. We don't have the money to do it ourselves. Long answer to your question. We are in discussions with the governor's office about doing a project in California, not the governor's office, people from the governor's office, not him, about could we do one just to make hydrogen for our fleet of locomotives in California, and that is something that's being considered. California regulations, the real problem is, I touched on in an earlier question, is that a city or county, LA County had this problem, doesn't get diversion credits if they do something clever with their waste as opposed to dumping it in a hole in the ground. So we're certainly available. It could be done, but it would require a very brave county to go up against the state. So yes, technologically we could start tomorrow, but practical matter, California makes things hard.
I think this is more for Mike. I haven't heard anyone talk about it today. A lot of companies like mine and out in industry have hazardous waste. You guys, and the go-to is cement kilns. I think everyone knows that. But I mean, you guys handle that as well?
Yeah. The thing to think about is when we developed this with the Army, it was to take everything. Originally for the burn pits in Afghanistan, to replace that, we can take munitions. I mean, it doesn't really matter what goes into our system. At 4,000 degrees, it's really forgiving. One of the other things I should have mentioned is a lot of the companies we're talking to internationally, they want to include sewage sludge as part of the feedstock because it destroys PFAS at that temperature. So yeah, we can take really nasty stuff and completely break it down. One of the other things that's interesting is the slag that we create could be used as a replacement for cement. There's a ground granulated blast furnace slag, for those of you that are familiar with that. We make essentially the chemical equivalent of that.
And I think one add-on, I guess, for both, you both mentioned, what does PFAS destroy at what temp?
1,600 degrees Fahrenheit is, a lot of the research says that PFAS and PFOS are destroyed at 1,600.
1600 F.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
This is for the Watogy. What do you lease the units for on the, what would be a typical lease for one unit, and do you have any placed in California?
None placed in California, similar reason. I shouldn't say that actually. We're really focused on the Midwest. We have basically our headquarters is in Nashville or just outside Nashville. Our research and development is in Louisville, and our production, our manufacturing is in Mooresville, which is south of Indianapolis. So we call it the I-65 corridor. Especially for early adopters, we want to be able to get to them quickly, and so we're looking at a 2-hour basically drive time from any place for 65, unless, which I will tell you, it's already happened, there is a customer large enough and influential enough to tell us that they'd like us someplace else. A unit costs anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 a lease per month. So in some cases, obviously, if there's a number of units, we can lower that price. And frankly, there are a lot of our customers, especially wastewater treatment plants, they are in a situation where they used to have a strategy around disposing, And that strategy is either at risk, I'll just say it's at least at risk with PFAS. And so they're worried about that. And where we come in that makes, I think, us unique is, you know, the cost of our unit is not very expensive. You know, we're in a raise right now, and our raise is $25 million for us to get over the hump. It's not $200 million. It's not, you know, and at the same time, when you look at that, if you think about the number just in wastewater treatment plants that are small, they're doing 1 to 15 tons of sludge a day. You know, that's at 90% liquid. You know, part of our scenario is that we actually use exhaust heat from the unit, and we dry the waste to the optimized moisture level, so it's obviously going to be less tonnage, which means that we can pretty much handle any rural or big wastewater treatment plant in the U.S. and not have a problem with the cost. Most of our smaller customers, you know, in wastewater treatment plant, they can't afford a big, you know, digester or, you know, any number of different solutions that will work, but they can't afford it and they don't have enough waste for it.
So I have a question for Todd. So have you looked at landfill leachate and processing that through your unit at all?
We haven't yet. I mean, I'm from the Midwest. We're pretty simple. We find a couple niches and we try to solve that problem, you know, and we don't try to solve the humongous big problems. We try to solve a problem that we know has a real impact for customers. And that's our philosophy of making money, is to go be the best for a type of customer. It doesn't mean that we don't have the capability to do that, but honestly, for the next 2 or 3 years, I don't see us going anywhere but a wastewater treatment plant, industrial waste, construction waste, schools and hospitals, because we process food waste. I mean, it's really easy. And so all of those things, we could literally take a school, we're in a conversation right now with one, and actually use their waste to be able to provide them their cooling for all of their kitchen area. You know, and so it just is really simple what we try to do. I mean, what you guys do actually has given me a little headache. I'm not gonna lie. You know, I mean, I'm not that smart, okay? You know, and so when I look at what you guys are doing, I am overly impressed with the type of people that are at this conference, you know. But again, we try to keep things very simple and executable. If we are the best at what we do for a specific group, we are going to make money. And then we can go look at the next thing. But don't get diverted by the big thing and miss out on the thing that you should be doing.
Todd, I think you need to stick around for the Ag Plastics Conference that starts tomorrow.
I want to respond to that, because just to be clear, when we started out, what we were doing was really complicated, and that was that we were trying to build, own, operate, maintain, finance, have the clever back-end process that would make fuels and all kinds of things like that. But over time, we've watched companies that have impacted pretty hard that were trying to do all of that, and they're developing projects all over the country and things like that. We decided to do just one thing, and that is just for Sierra Energy, and that is make the world's best gasifier and make that available to other people where they can do all those hard things. And so we are focused on just the one thing about doing the clever gasifier. Now, the railroad does all kinds of complicated stuff, but that's different.
Any other questions out there? I have one more, Todd. What do you classify as early adopters?
That's a good question. I mean, I'll just tell you, I mean, we're looking for a company that has homogenized waste, fairly homogenized, doesn't have to be totally homogenized waste, but fairly homogenized waste that is in one of those areas that I've mentioned, that is typically in the I-65 corridor or 2 hours from that, has either a need for multiple units at a singular site or has the ability for multiple sites to have units. So that, I mean, we have one customer, I can't say their name because they're not public yet, but they literally could take almost all of our units for the first 2 years if they wanted to. I mean, now, do I think that that's going to happen? It takes a lot longer. Look, I've done business now for 30 years, and, you know, never in this kind of business, but it's really, I commend you for pivoting and not trying to do everything. You know, that's the killer. I mean, I have to spend hours every week, it feels like, telling our founder, just stay focused. We've got a winner if we just develop the winner into a winner. You don't ever finish a race. I don't know how many of you all have worked with founders before, but they get so, I mean, they miss the point, you know, and execution is the key, I think, for most projects. You know, it's easy to come up with a good idea. It's hard to actually create that into something real, and it's almost damn near impossible to execute it consistently.
As far as ideal initial customers, for us, big companies that have got a lot of technical know-how, so they know exactly what they're getting into. We used to have, for the first, gosh, I don't know, 10 years, we must have had dozens and dozens of cities all over the country going, my God, I want to go zero waste. We want to make hydrogen for our fleet. And we'd go out there and we'd spend all this time with them. But in the end, a city isn't going to take the city shouldn't take a technological risk on a novel new technology. So I need companies that know what they're doing, know what they're getting into, and that we're not on their critical path. And because it'll be a first of a kind at that scale when they're running, you know, at that scale. And so what if we don't work out? I don't want to be responsible for the whole system seizing up. And so, because that seems to happen a lot with novel first of a kind technologies. So we want to be not on their critical path. And so we're part of a larger project. And so those are the kind of projects that the first 8 are really focused on, where we're a very good piece of their story and what they're accomplishing. But if we don't work out exactly the way we expect to in the first, you know, first period of time, it's not going to bollocks up the whole works.
Sorry, I'm going to add one thing. So there's two qualifications I didn't mention that are actually at the first thing. They have to be concerned about landfills. If they're not concerned about landfill diversion or sustainability, really, then it's kind of moot for us, okay? You know, the second is that they have to be concerned about their ROI. I know I'm going to win the ROI game. I know it. I'm an OpEx. And I'm taking something that already exists in their budget. They don't have to go out and find some CapEx dollars. They don't have to go do all this. The only CapEx dollars we have is installation. And that isn't much. And so when you think about financial solutions to get to zero landfill, a lot of it takes money and a lot of ingenuity. I can just come and replace that headache. They don't want a headache. That's another thing we look for. Somebody don't want a headache. They don't want to be learning new things. They don't want their processes changed, because we literally try to sit our unit as close to the place where that waste is being made, and they can see it literally replacing the dumpster often. Wherever they put the dumpster is usually where we put our machine. And then we pipe the energy into whatever mechanicals are closest by that make the most logical sense and the most financial sense. It's an ROI game. I mean, you want to scale, you got to have an ROI. And it can't be 10 years from now. Even though everybody's goals are 10 years from now, ours isn't. If I get to a company and that company says they're going to be zero landfill or carbon zero by 2050, and they don't have anything in between there, I'm not interested, because they're not real. They're not really serious. And even if they could be a financial win for us, don't get me wrong, that is part of the play. Our founders and the people who are involved with this want to actually make a difference in the world and not just make more money. Because if it was more money, I wouldn't be there. I want to make money, but I want to make a difference. I've got 10 kids. I'm counting on my kids to make 50 grandkids. You think I'm kidding? You can ask them. I've been saying this for years. I'm just asking you to do half of what I've done for you. Okay? I want this to be a better place. And we all know, I mean, those stats that Michael had on the screen, they're real. And it's getting worse and worse. So we can talk about this and continue to try to figure it out, or we can actually just get to doing things. I get a little preachy. I'm a dad of 10, you know.
You better sell a lot of units. All right. Well, should we give them a round of applause for
Yes.
these presentations?
And we are at reception next door. Thank you, everybody.